I just thought like, yeah, it's great for all these, great masters and whatnot, but I'm not like, there's no way that's happening to me in this life. But um, yeah, so I didn't really I would say I was kind of like kind of spiritual, but not religious.
Yeah.
But I wasn't on any kind of a path. I had no kind of practice. At that point, I wasn't even really using psychedelics. So it
Yeah.
really kind of sidewinded me.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't. And we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hersh and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. My guest today on Truth Tastes Funny is Leo Mars. Leo is a writer. He's a creative strategist. He's a former nightlife entrepreneur turned conscious explorer. And I love that term, conscious explorer. And you'll see when we talk why we use that. He was born in the Alaskan wild and lived a life full of extremes, bear encounters to founding America's first breathwork studio. You're not going to find someone with those two things on their resume. His work bridges ancient wisdom and future tech, helping people navigate the chaos of modern life with clarity and creative power. And Leo is currently writing a book called The New Creator: Rise of the Mindful Artist in the New Meaning Economy, a book about reclaiming purpose in a post-labor world. Welcome, Leo, to Truth Tastes Funny.
Oh, thanks for having me, Hirsch. Happy to be
It's
here.
it's great to have you here. I love the title, The New Creator. We've spoken before, and I know a little about your background and what you're up to. And I love the marriage, as my listeners know, and if they listen to my Yes Brand podcast, they know even better. But I love the marriage between truth and business, between truth and even industry, if you want to use the word, and particularly selling the truth. When we talked, you said to me that you had kind of an awakening at 27 years old where you realized you weren't selling the truth. And that was during your nightlife entrepreneurial era. But tell us a little bit about your childhood, because you also started entrepreneurial endeavors at a pretty young age, right?
Good. Yeah, at 12 years old, I had my first business, had a marketing campaign, had hired my best friend, more work than the two of us could handle. And it wasn't until I'd always been entrepreneurial all through high school, was working part-time in construction for my father, swinging a hammer, and also doing all sorts of businesses, importing cars to Alaska, where I'm from, and doing all sorts of things. It wasn't until my senior year in high school, first day of my first class, senior year, I was sitting in a small business entrepreneurship class, and the very first, moment, they put the description of an entrepreneur on the projector screen, and I was just shocked because I realized I was an entrepreneur. I'd never heard of it until that moment. I'm like, oh my
Wow.
goodness, I'm an entrepreneur. So yeah, my whole life has been entrepreneurial.
And it's fun to hear that. It's fun to hear people light up with awareness. But tell us about where a shift happened for you, because it, it it's an interesting evolution in your case.
Yeah, yeah. So I opened a nightclub and a four-star restaurant when I was 25 years old, and in Denver, Colorado, and was kind of like in probably like fourth or fifth gear, kind of cruising along 2 years in when I was visiting my father in Alaska for about a week, just kind of getting away. And this was February of 2009, and I slipped into an altered state in the shower. Totally, as far as I can tell, still kind of unprovoked. I have no idea what brought this up, why it happened. Seemed to have been spontaneous. But basically, the way I understand it now is from like a mechanism of action perspective. I had no thoughts in my head. And up until that moment in life, I'd never had a state of like pure thoughtlessness. So I would call it like non-dual, right? Like my sense of, I wasn't out of body, but my sense of self was everywhere. It was beyond the walls of the house,
Leo, what was
beyond
your, sorry to interrupt you. Up
the,
until that point, what was your uh, consciousness awareness like, would you say?
yeah. Well, I'd always been really since my senior year in high school, I got into kind of like new age thoughts and mysticism and things like that. But I'd never thought that that level of, let's call it like an enlightened state was accessible. Like I just thought like, yeah, it's great for all these, great masters and whatnot, but I'm not like, there's no way that's happening to me in this life. But um, yeah, so I didn't really I would say I was kind of like kind of spiritual, but not religious.
Yeah,
But I wasn't on any kind of a path. I had no kind of practice. At that point, I wasn't even really using psychedelics. So it
yeah.
really kind of sidewinded me.
And you still don't know what brought it on, so to speak, what put you in that state.
No, I don't.
But
I
what did you
don't.
discover? What did you come out of? What did you come through it with?
Yeah. Well, I would say it probably took me a few years to really come through that moment. You know, well, first off, like the day after I was on Google and I was searching, like I would love to see the words I was using to try and figure out what had just happened to me. But I found this concept in this American philosopher's integral theory and Wilber's integral theory. And he calls this his states and stages conception. And basically, what it implies is that states, um, like the state experience I had in the shower, are kind of ever present. They're underneath the surface of our conscious mind, of our personality, um, and those are kind of ever present. So they're not something to achieve. They're even more primary than the personality. But stages are vertical, and they kind of you move through them sequentially, just like any psychological stage, and you can't skip stages. If you have one of these like you know non-ordinary state experiences, you will interpret it through the lens of your stage. And so I could see, according to his model, which draws on spiral dynamics, I could see that I was at this orange stage in spiral dynamics, modern, empirical, kind of egocentric strive drive, kind of the birth of the scientific revolution and scientism, which wasn't very flattering. So I could see like, okay, I guess I'm not very evolved psychologically, but at least I know I'm not crazy. Um, that led to a several year depression. I really started going into a depression within about 6 months of that experience in the shower. I had a really tough time trying to figure out like if I am everything and somehow paradoxically nothing and everything, but no thing, um, what do I do with this life? Um, I went into quite a bit of self-loathing and judgment of myself for having you know, intoxicated people and have been pushing intoxication so hard. And I really wanted to live a life that was actually serving my customer as
Well,
opposed to, you know,
let's stop there for a second because um, when you were reflecting on this stuff, so in the day to day, you get up and you're living a pretty cool life and you're successful and you're appreciated and but are you seeing anything in the nightlife industry that you are consciously like saying, "Oh, that sucks," like seeing people abusing drugs or doing stuff that's harmful to one another or themselves? Are you seeing stuff that you are aware is kind of preying on you a little bit?
unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
I was definitely pushing that hard and marketing that hard. Um, I can say after that experience in the shower, I was able to sell that venue within 2 months of the experience in the shower. But when I went back home to Denver, it was St. Patrick's Day, maybe 45 days later.
Right.
And I said, hey guys, unbeknownst to me, I started shifting into this next stage of development, postmodernism. And so my aperture of awareness kind of expanded because of that experience. So I started going, oh, well, what about the planet? Well, what about other people and the highest good for them and the animals? And so I basically spent 6 weeks greening the venue and threw a going green party for St. Patrick's, composting and
Oh, I
recycling,
like that. Yeah.
sourcing our meats and produce locally. And it wasn't cool at the time. Like it was not like at all trendy. I didn't know any other businesses doing it in
It's a great
2000.
idea, Leo, to green for St. Patty's, and I don't think I've heard anybody. No, I mean I'm saying it like, that's something you innovated. I
Yeah,
think it it's as a branding guy, as a marketing guy, I think it's great. I think it's
yeah,
a great idea. It doesn't belong to anyone, right? It belongs to the world, but it's a nice thing to bring out there. So,
yeah,
I'm just saying I think it would be cool to bring that back, bring that
yeah.
out.
Any restaurateurs out there? There's an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, so go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you. So you had a greeting party.
yeah, yeah. And really, the challenge for me, and I can only really see this now in retrospect, was trying to resolve this. Like, if I am not this person that I thought I was, or these achievements or these material possessions, what am I? And the only thing I knew for the longest time was that I was everything and no thing. And so that was a struggle for a long time. And I can say like it's only been probably the last 6 years maybe where I've started to embrace that it is a paradox and it's hard to wrap the mind around. I almost kind of like reference the concept of the Trinity a little bit, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the idea that like I am primarily, let's call it consciousness or spirit or awareness, whatever I am, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, and this human body can be essentially like an art piece. Like this is my creation. Um, but yeah, that really put me into a many year kind of deep inquiry, wanting to understand how to be in the world.
Now, we were talking about also here, just a minute ago, this tangent kind of started with you recalling self-loathing and feeling that. And, I'm wondering where that part came from. And I wonder, uh, did you what was your childhood like as far as like the your sense of self?
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like we touched on this when we spoke last week. I went through something as an infant that was really kind of uh, like basically my parents left me at 18 months for a trip to
Right.
Jamaica to build this church, and they didn't, I think, have the, I guess, consciousness themselves that to know that that's too young to leave a child for that long. I had no sense of time and space and planes and trips and coming back. So that experience, what I made that mean, how I interpreted that, and I remember explicitly telling myself, "Oh, that's what this means. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy of security and belonging." And yeah, so I would say that's been a lifelong journey, working through
Okay, so
that.
that's a big chunk right there.
Mhm,
Feeling, not being given that sense of security and
mhm,
enough, being enough for your parents to care enough about you. Um,
mhm,
so that could put anyone kind of off kilter in terms of as they start to grow and, wanting to please parents or not, or please, it's all off. It's all off balance, that thing. Um, and and when you were kind of in this exploratory phase and you sold the club, you you went to did you go to Spain? Did you
South America.
South
Yeah.
America? And now you're doing this journey, you're engaged in this journey. What would you say was, because the questions we hear all those questions, what were some of the answers? What were some of the first answers you remember getting?
To what question in particular?
Well, to what your purpose was, what
Yeah.
you should be contributing. We talked about your uh, thinking of the person as an artistic expression, or you're trying to figure out, what can I give? What is my
Mhm.
purpose here?
Yeah.
What are we here even to do? So
Yeah.
what were some things that
Yeah.
were revelatory for you?
Well, certainly selling truth. Definitely like became very interested in what I would call sacred commerce. And going back to like, the marketplaces in Egypt, they said, it said that they saw the marketplace as a place to bring basically higher level consciousness to their kingdom. Um, so sacred commerce became definitely top of the list. And then also I became very interested in the Ikigai framework to use that as a kind of compass and a North Star. So, it's one thing to go, hey, my ego wants this. And that's essentially what I did with the nightclub. I had been, you know, financially successful, really, up until that point, and realized that like that the nightclub was really just kind of like a jewel in my ego crown.
Hmm.
I didn't need that for money. It was really just kind of a big play thing, more or less. Um, so so and I was good at it. But that ikigai, where do my gifts, like actually what I am genuinely good at and just naturally adept, where does that meet my passion and the marketplace? And like, how can I really hone in on that?
Yeah.
So I would say those are the two big ones: is the selling the truth or sacred commerce, and then really doing what I'm here to do.
Yeah. That's a mixed bag in a way. I think, it's great to know, it's great to recognize that we want to synthesize all that stuff. It's a lot of work to actually do it. And, you're kind of still figuring that out in a way, I think, right?
Yeah, and I think that's probably a lifelong path, because it's like for me that's almost like it's not necessarily a moving target, but we are moving through time and space. I feel like I'm in a way I've kind of coagulated a lot of that, and I feel very much on purpose these days. But certainly, like, I'm constantly checking that compass.
Well, now let's talk a little bit about some of the things you're engaged in. Uh, you have the book. You're working on the book, so you're writing.
Yeah.
What are some other highlights that are in the works right now?
Yeah. So as you know, I opened a breathwork studio in Venice, California in 2018, kind of the first of its kind before breathwork was trendy. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know it was going to trend, but it did. Um, so, had to close that because of COVID, but that really, seeing thousands of people come through that space, this little 600 square foot room, um, to breathe, really tuned me into the power of the breath. So I've been very, very up on breath since then, since 2018. And really, my interest and that experience in the shower, one of the only qualities of that state, it was really more or less it was without qualities mostly relative to my ordinary consciousness. But one
Like
of
a
the only
void, like kind of a void, right?
yeah, and an allness. Um,
Mm, I get
one of
that.
the
Yeah.
yeah, one of the only qualities it had, I just knew, and there was, like I said, there weren't any really thoughts going on, but I knew that I could just exhale the cosmos into existence. Like, no correlation to the breath at that point, but I had this sensing, this knowing that I could just effortlessly universe into existence.
Wow.
So creativity has been really core to my worldview since then. And for me, I'm big into the breath largely because of how that impacts creativity, um, clarity of
Yeah.
direction, connection to our kind of quintessential self. Um,
I one thing that just comes up for me now as you're talking is that, you know, creativity creativity is not often enough associated with uh the sacred commerce kind of, concept. It's separate. People think of it separate. An artist isn't considered typically a business person, or that we don't consider ourselves. Like I was a comedian or I was a screenwriter, and I wouldn't think of myself as a business person for that reason. Like I wouldn't, the kind of like Ryan Reynolds of the world, where they were, they could be an actor and a screenwriter and own a marketing agency and be a pitchman and all of that stuff, was own a sports team. You could be an entrepreneur, but the idea of the creative person being very business savvy was not, just didn't, I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen an example of that, and I didn't even desire it in my mind. I just kind of wanted to play, and I think that's, but creative people do create. We're experts at creating. So we're the perfect people also, because I think we're sensitive. We're aware, we're a little empathetic, stuff like that. I think we end up being a different kind of businessman than
mm,
or business person than
mm,
than someone who comes up with just the I got to get mine, idea. Do you have you discovered that you kind of move in different circles from those other kinds of entrepreneurs? Like, do you find people who are like-minded, but also come across people who are kind of maybe very transactional, maybe very just all about the numbers, all about the bottom line, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. And for even to date, some of my friends, I'm now 42. Some of my friends are very successful in their businesses, and I definitely could not do what they do. You know, I think one of the gifts of having started young and not only had success financially, but also like publicly, kind of getting praise and being in the newspaper, and um, it gave me a sense of like that's not it. Like making money. If my aim is to make money, there's a million ways to make money, but making money on purpose, now that's the goal. So yeah, absolutely. And I still, I can get into the business stuff and I enjoy that. I enjoy the jargon and the, modeling and the strategies and those conversations, but I'm much more, in fact, I would say I took a huge pay cut at 27
Yeah.
and really took a step back and went, okay, in some ways I climbed the wrong ladder and I'm like, oh, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Um,
But you discovered that. I mean, I think a lot of people get to a much older stage and realize that they, why have they been in that this long, or they get
Mhm.
stuck in the corporate, machine, and they end the golden handcuffs, or even silver handcuffs, whatever handcuffs
Mhm.
they have that make them feel trapped, and they're like, why am I doing this? I'm just tired of doing this. And then they eventually, have a moment where they break out and change their mind. I mean, I think for me, I just recognized at a certain point that there was stuff about the business that I had spent most of my career in different areas that I was ignoring, like the ikigai concept, dawned on me as well. I was like, look, there's things to which I'm ideally suited, that I like more than I give myself credit for, that I enjoy more. I have my head stuck on a certain idea, and that's just where I got stuck. It doesn't have any greater or grandiose meaning. So now, uh, 42, a bunch of, buns in the oven, a bunch of stuff going on. What ties it all together for you? If someone were to say, you know, what is your big hairy goal, your big picture goal even, uh is there something that drives you, that you feel you're driving toward with all these projects?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's to empower the kind of the hero of a thousand faces, that hero within each and every one of us. There's, modern society in many ways has kind of like categorized us, and we've gone along with it. We've bought into the advertisements, and um, yeah, I think it's, I see us moving towards, and have for a long time. Around that same experience at 27, I got very interested in, you could say it's technology, but I was going back to the origin of language as a kind of primitive technology. So I got very into technology, and essentially the power of these more fundamental tools like language and tool making to advance society. So, I think we are kind of living through, and there's a counter argument to this, but I think we're going to look back at this era as a very uh, tough time for humans. That we have to, for example, work to live. We have to do things that we don't want to do to feed ourselves and our families. I think we're going to look back at that and go, "Oh my gosh, remember? Oh, it was such a rough time."
Well,
We
I Go ahead, go ahead.
well, it's our birthright. We're here.
Yeah.
It's our planet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I hope we do. I hope we do get a chance to evolve in that way and look back and say, why did we make things so hard? Why? Because I think of that all the time, and I probably have done it. Well, I definitely have done it to myself, and I don't think that I'm the great simplifier in the world. I mean, my wife will tell you that I probably have made things more circuitous than are necessary, but that's part of life's journey as well. But I think, you know, uh, we have a tendency to undo ourselves in a lot of ways. And that's where, maybe circling back to that experience at 27, the shower experience, where uh, whatever happened, you yourself made a decision or made a plea not to not to do that treadmill, that thing of the rat race, or the whatever, the self-indulgent kind of cycle of illusory achievement, whatever it is, all that bullshit. So you're inside, something inside you, your soul cried out and wanted to do something else. And a lot of us have experienced it in different ways at different times, but I think it's fortunate, and uh, it was one of the things that, without even knowing a lot of the backstory, just knowing some of your backstory and some of your present story, that I wanted my audience to hear. But as we kind of wrap this conversation up, what would be, if you were speaking uh, to people who have, a lot of people, we've all been through COVID, we've been through, we're going through stuff now. It's like everybody's going through stuff, and and like you pointed out, it's an intense experience in the world right now. Doesn't matter what country you're in, it doesn't matter who you are. The world is intense right now. That's how I look at it. That's how it feels to everybody I talk to. What would your uh, what would you impart to people who are wanting to feel more hopeful and wanting to feel less strained and twisted and contorted and forced and all that other stuff that puts
Mm.
all that stress on us? What's some of the what's something you can just give them to think about?
Yeah. I would say, all that we desire to be, all that we dream of being, all of our golden shadow is already within us in this moment. And so it's not something to achieve, it's not out there. And so coming back to the moment, and I use breath awareness to do that. It's one of the functions of breath. Coming back to the moment, we discover our our true power. And in that, like by developing, you could say like somatic awareness, but like when we come back to the moment and start to listen, we know what's true and what's not, or what's resonant or what's, a contraction. And we can use that as a compass to make decisions in our life. Not only that, but all these aspects of ourselves, when you find yourself in your power and in flow, um, those are just a result of being present in the moment. So that would be the first little tidbit. Um, Develop a practice of coming to the moment, because it's also going to be, I say, like, the most successful humans of the future aren't going to have the highest IQs. We've already got AI that's beyond our IQ,
Right.
and that's just exponential. It's going to be those with the highest PQs, or presence quotients, who are going to succeed in the coming era. It's all those human skills of intuition, foresight, imagination, and feeling, the ability to, you know, um, in a sense, synthesize through experience. When we're present, we have more use, we have a greater use of the resources of our mind. We're in a state of heart brain coherence. Um, we can handle the overwhelming loads of information that we're getting better. And it's also going to be those who have developed the skill of their imagination, that are going to succeed in the coming years.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thank you, Leo. I do. I feel like that gives us hope, because that can really make a the world a different kind of place. To think to ourselves, yeah, there's room for emotional intelligence and there's room for maturity as a species, to have surpassed some of the pettiness, some of the selfishness, some of the fear, just the self-loathing, like we talked about, the self-sabotage, and really get to a place of true unity. Where we're really trying to move ourselves forward, all of us as a species, is the best word I can use.
Mhm.
Um, well, thank you so much, Leo, for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Harsh. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.